now at the grave of Timothy Evans, who was born in 1924 in the Vale of Glamorgan in Wales. The story begins that in 1949, him and his wife Geraldine and their daughter Beryl took up lodgings at 10 Willington Place in Notting Hillgate. Their landlord was Jonathan Christie. Apparently the marriage wasn't going well. They had one child and she was expecting a second child. And Timothy Evans said, you know, we can't afford to have another child, we don't have the money. So John Christie said, I can perform an abortion. He went out one day and basically John Christie murdered his wife, Beryl, and the younger daughter, Geraldine. They said he strangled the child with his own necktie. And when Timothy Evans came back, he said it didn't go well. So Timothy Evans fled and went down to Wales to be with his aunt and uncle. And then he went and confessed to a murder that he didn't do to the police. And then the police came to 10 Willington Place. They found the bodies of his wife and child in the scullery. Timothy Evans was put on trial and he should never have gone on trial because he had a mental age of 12 years old. And he really couldn't defend himself in court. And Jonathan Christie gave evidence against him. You know, and the judge in January 1950, the jury gave him a guilty verdict, and the judge said he will be sentenced to death. He will be hanged until he is dead. He did have an appeal, but that failed. And then on the 9th of March 1950, at Pentonville Prison, Timothy Evans was hanged for a murder he didn't commit. And then 3 years later, they found that Jonathan Christie had committed all the murders at 10 Willington Place. So they were both hanged in the end, but in the case of Timothy Evans, it was wrongfully. A full public inquiry got underway in 1955, and in 1965, Timothy Evans was exhumed from Pentonville Prison, buried here in St Patrick's. The next year, in 1966, he received a full and posthumous pardon by then the Home Secretary, which was Patrick Jenkins. And in 1965, hanging was suspended and it was finally abolished in 1969. There's 3 family plots here to Alfred Hitchcock. We were just at the main plot. This is the second family plot, and this is his uncle, Charles Joseph Hitchcock. Married to Catherine Hitchcock. They had 6 children, and 3 of them are remembered in this family plot. 2 of them are actually buried here. So one was Alfred Hitchcock's cousin, Charlie Hitchcock, who died in 1917 in Beersheba, them days Palestine, now called Israel. So Alfred Hitchcock actually lost 2 people during World War I, his father and his cousin here called Charlie. Also there's Claire, Kate Claire Hitchcock, his cousin, who died in 1943, aged 60 years. And also in 1944, the Reverend John Hitchcock, who was a Catholic priest, served the parish of Harrow. So he died in 1944, aged 60 years old, and he'd been a Catholic priest for 37 years. And always believes that Alfred Hitchcock's movie in 1953 called I Confess, where Montgomery Clift goes on trial as a Catholic priest for a murder he didn't commit because he learnt about it in the confessional. I believe the inspiration behind that movie was Alfred Hitchcock's cousin here, the Reverend John Hitchcock. So I'm at the third and family plot here to Alfred Hitchcock. In the Alfred Hitchcock family, there were 3 Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock, the film director, Alfred Hitchcock, his uncle, Alfred Hitchcock, his cousin. So here, we've got the last family plot, Alfred Hitchcock, who is Alfred Hitchcock's uncle of the same name, died in 1926. Also his cousin, Alfred Hitchcock, who died in 1944. And also Alfred Hitchcock's elder brother, William Hitchcock, who they believe died of alcoholism, cirrhosis and liver, died in 1943 at the Elephant and Castle in South East London. He died in 1943 and was buried here in the family plot, although it isn't named. This is the 3rd family plot of the Alfred Hitchcock family. So in November 1994, they started demolishing houses to make way for the M11 link road. Over 500 houses were demolished, and there was one woman who lived here for 92 years, all the years of her life. I believe her name was Peggy, She refused to move, so when they were doing compulsory purchase, she wouldn't leave. The council took her someone moved out, and she refused to go. The last day she was taken out by her son, put into a care home, and she died a few months later. But in an act of defiance, that when she died, she had her ashes spread on the M11 link. So this is Claremont Road, the only road in Leytonstone with not one house that's similar. Yeah, I'm at the house, the former house of Paul Hardcastle, who was born on the 10th of December 1957 in St Mary Abbot Hospital in Kensington. And he lived here in the 1980s. So what he became famous for was he brought out a single in 1984 called Rainforest, got up to number 48 in the charts. But the next year, in 1985, he watched a documentary film called Vietnam Requiem about the Vietnam War vets. And they said he went over into that pub over there, the Northcote. He wrote the song and he recorded it here, which was his mum's living room, and that was 19. And he went to number 1 for 5 weeks in the UK. He went to number 1 in 8 countries around the world. It was number 1 in New Zealand, France, Holland, Switzerland. It even reached number 15 in the American charts. It basically made a big name for himself. The next year he followed it up. He did a song called Don't Waste My Time with Carol Kenyon, who was the backing singer for Heaven 17. And in the same year he did a song called The Wizard, which reached number 15 in the charts, but became the Top of the Pops theme tune from 86 to 91. Nowadays Paul Hardcastle is more a music producer. He lives with his wife Dolores, and they have 3 children who live in Havering at Bower near Romford in Essex. We just passed the house of Stuart Freeborn, who was born in 351 Grove Green Road in Leytonstone on the 5th of September 1914. And in 1940 he became a makeup artist. He was a makeup artist on the movie The Thief of Baghdad. Now obviously he must have served in the army and the military during World War II, because his next film that he worked on, he did the makeup for Alec Guinness when he played Fagin in Oliver Twist in 1948. He played that character. He also did the makeup in 1955 for Richard Todd in the film The Dam Busters. In 1957 he worked with Alec Guinness again in the film The Bridge on the River Kwai. In 1964 he was hired by Stanley Kubrick, and he did the makeup for Peter Sellers in the movie Dr. Strangelove. He did all 5 characters that Peter Sellers played. And then Kubrick hired him again in 1968 for the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. In 1971 he was the makeup artist on 10 Willington Place. In 1972 Alice in Wonderland. In 1974 he worked with Peter Sellers again in a movie, a World War II comedy called Soft Beds and Hard Battles. Then in 1976 he worked with Lee Remick and Gregory Peck in the movie The Omen. Then in 1977 Richard Lucas hires him and he becomes the makeup artist on the movie Star Wars. And in that movie he created the character of Chewbacca. In 1980 he hires him again for the movie The Empire Strikes Back, and he brought in the character Yoda, and Yoda was based on his own face and that of Albert Einstein. And then he was hired again for the Return of the Jedi, and then from 1980 to 87 he worked on the Superman movies with Christopher Reeve, and basically retired in 1987. And then he passed away in February, 5th of February 2013, aged 98 years old. But here in Leytonstone he was remembered. On the 12th of December 2015 they put up the blue plaque to his old house here in Leytonstone, and that day Darth Vader and the Star Wars stormtroopers came down Leytonstone High Road and were outside the house, where they were all taking pictures of the councillors being all tied up and having their mouths gagged. And then Darth Vader went for a few beers in the local Heathcote pub. So that's one of Leytonstone's claim to fame, the great Stuart Freeborn.